That's the worst part of this. The union will kick you out, but make you pay dues regardless of your membership status.
Wow.
So just one example among many of some of the difficulty that people run into when they're getting out of unions. We are hip to all these tricks. In fact, we put something on the website just recently detailing 3 of the different ways that government unions will use to try to keep people in. That's one of them. Restrictive terms that you don't understand until you actually go to resign.
Can I pause for a second and just note that we got Brian on here who's getting Congressman Massey on, and our typical lineup includes like homeless people that believe in Bigfoot.
Welcome to the Brian Nichols Show, your source for common sense politics on the We Are Libertarians Network. The Brian Nichols Show is the fastest growing liberty podcast that brings together people from all means of political thought as we seek to have meaningful conversations about the issues you care about. At the Brian Nichols Show, our goal is to leave the audience educated, enlightened, and informed. And now your host, Brian Nichols.
Well, hey there, folks. Brian Nichols here on the Brian Nichols Show. Welcome to tonight's episode. That's right. If you're listening to the audio version, it's Wednesday, but if you are watching the YouTube version, it is airing on YouTube live at 8 p.m. Eastern. That's right, folks. The Brian Nichols Show is now in video format. So to you audio listener, you want to check out the program before it actually airs and get to see the video version of the show. We'll head over to YouTube for 8 o'clock on Sunday nights, Tuesday nights, and Thursday nights for the live streaming of the episode. Now, for folks onto the program, who do we have? David Osborne from the Americans for Fair Treatment. David first joined the program when he was part of the Fairness Center back a few years ago, focusing on helping protect public sector employees' rights. He's joining the program now to give those union employees a voice, standing up against their public sector unions and what we can do at the Brian Nichols Show audience to help support their cause. And before we get started, folks, if you want to go ahead and learn how to get one of these awesome "Don't Hurt People and Don't Take People's Stuff" bumper stickers, stick around to after the episode. But with that being said, on to the show. David Osborne here on the Brian Nichols Show.
Brian, how you doing?
Doing good, David. Thanks so much for joining the program. So glad to have you back on the show, and so glad to see you've been having a lot of wild, exciting adventures happening over in your world. Namely, you're in a new position over at the Americans for Fair Treatment. You last joined the program back, I think it was like episode 60, 69, 68, somewhere in there, when you were part of recent guest. It was the Fairness Center. So I know you've been very busy. Let's kind of dig into what's been happening over in your world.
Yeah. I work on an organization called Americans for Fair Treatment. It's a nonprofit that helps people who've been failed by their public sector unions. So we've worked with teachers, firefighters, law enforcement, state municipal employees, among others, who were counting on their union to treat them fairly. And many of them have come to the conclusion that they're really better off without a union.
So you say they've come to that conclusion, and we've talked to Nathan most recently here in the Fairness Center, and we hear that it's mostly because a lot of people just don't realize what's happening behind the scenes. But when people do start to wake up to the nitty-gritty, the dirty details of what their contracts actually say, what maybe they weren't told that they should have been told, we see more often than not that people are starting to say, well, this is wrong, and they're looking for outlets. So let's kind of start off here setting up what brought you going from the Fairness Center to the Americans for Fair Treatment. What was that progression like?
Sure. I joined and was part of starting the Fairness Center because I was convinced there were people in Pennsylvania who really cared about public employees, and I had to be convinced that these public employees were not treated fairly by their unions. The reason that was kind of surprising to me is that I lived in Florida at the time, where public sector unions just don't have as much of a hold on state politics. I'm not saying that they do their job that well. I'm just saying that to the extent that they're active, they're at least in the ballpark. What I learned that was happening in Pennsylvania, and really this is happening across the country, is that public sector union officials seem to be more concerned with growing their power and their status than they were in properly representing these particular employees. So again, we're talking about teachers, first responders, state municipal workers. I started to meet with some of those people, and I learned firsthand from them some of the stories that I thought were unbelievable. It's sort of like the nightmare that you might go through with a cable company, or with, at the very least, bad customer service. At the worst, constitutional rights were being abridged. Wow. So one of the first stories I heard, for instance, was a woman who was, her name is Jane Ladley. She was forced to pay the union as a condition of employment as a teacher. And at that time, that was the law. Unions could do that. But she had some religious reasons for not wanting to pay the union. And as a result, there was a law in place that allowed her to object on religious grounds to payment of any fee, any payment of any kind to the union. But the union was actually using that very process against her to make sure that the money that they knew they would never get their hands on was going to a nonprofit that they would have approved otherwise. So, for instance, she wanted to send, there was another woman that I worked with who wanted to send her money. She was experiencing the exact same thing, wanted to send her money to a local pregnancy center that helps women who chose not to undergo an abortion. That was something she felt very strongly about. Well, the union said, no, we'll only allow you to give your money to a charity that counsels women on all options. Of course, that was antithetical to what she believed. So even though they weren't going to get the money, they wanted to make sure that the money that would otherwise go to them was going to a charity that they would support. That's the kind of stuff. Again, that's a constitutional issue. You might think of it as a small issue because there were small dollar amounts involved, but these were high value because they were high principle issues. So after meeting with a number of these folks, I agreed. What you need here is a public interest law firm. I had gone to law school to help people, to make a difference in the world. I know a lot of lawyers say that. A lot of lawyers don't follow through on that. I wanted to follow through on it. And so when I came up to Pennsylvania, I started representing these people, and it wasn't just them. It was one public employee after another who was forced to support politics that they didn't agree with, who was forced to support candidates that they would have never supported, and they didn't have any say in the matter, really, without a lawyer.
That's wow. That's wild. So, I mean, time out really quick there.
Sure.
Because I think there's going to be a lot of people who are going to hear this, and they're probably in the public sector union right now, and they maybe don't realize that this is happening to them. So they should, at the very least, be trying to find some outlets that they can, I guess, utilize that can help them raise this awareness up to other folks who are in the union. Because, I mean, I was talking to Nathan last time from the Fairness Center, and one of the stories he told was just mind-blowing to me, that the audacity of one of the public sector or organizations saying, well, don't ask that question. Don't worry about that.
Right.
Like, yeah. How dare you? That's the money that you're paying. Well, not even just paying. It's being forcibly taken from your paycheck, whether you like it or not. And it's going to these union dues. It's just insane.
Right. Well, Brian, I mean, Nathan and I worked closely together for years at the Fairness Center. We worked on the legal side. So when these things would come up, these folks needed a lawyer. And the reality is, if you go out in the private market and try to pay for a lawyer for these things, you're going to burn through a few $100s in a couple of hours before the value, at least the monetary value of your claim, is already exhausted. As you and I know, the Constitution matters a lot more than that. So some lawyer was needed to fight for these folks. Now, the reason that I'm now at Americans for Fair Treatment is that filing these kinds of lawsuits, helping these individuals, irreplaceable. It's a big part of how these folks can take the power back. But what Americans for Fair Treatment helps people do is, when they don't have a lawsuit, when they want to speak out, when they want to, like you're talking about, educating their coworkers, when they want to make some other difference, say with the legislature, they need the tools to do it. They're going up against a big union machine that works alongside big government to grow government and to increase taxes. And they are just a little guy on their own.
Yeah. So let's talk about what you've been doing then. And that is working at the Americans for Fair Treatment and giving these folks a platform. So let's start off introducing the Americans for Fair Treatment. What is the mission, the goal of the organization as you've started it?
Yeah, we help to educate public employees as to their constitutional rights with respect to public sector union issues. And we connect people once we've educated them with resources that they need to adequately defend those rights. So we like to tell people that we help to move them from a position of union dependence to a place of union independence. And that can look like a lot of different things. There are some people who want to declare union independence by resigning from their union, by quitting and ending their dues payments to support things that they really don't support. And then for some people, it looks like kicking the union out altogether, maybe starting their own union or decertifying the old union and negotiating directly with their employer. The problem for a lot of these public employees, as they've expressed it to me, is that the union has made themselves appear to be irreplaceable. Right. That's why dependence happens. After people are properly educated about their rights and then are connected with resources, they realize that the union has sold them a lie, and that in reality, the union is out for itself. It's out to enrich its public employee, its public sector union officials, and to grow in power and influence, and ultimately to achieve social goals that many of the folks that they're supposed to represent never supported in the first place.
Yeah, and one thing I constantly hear from my friends on the left is, well, look at the support of the unions. Like, these are the folks out there they're the workers of America, and look at the money they're pouring in to these Democratic candidates. They must be supporting them. But I don't think a lot of people realize that in many cases, the public sector union dues are just automatically taken right from your paycheck. And it's only in some of these right to work states that we've seen a lot of people starting to back away, because they're saying, I don't want this. I don't want my money taken and going to something that honestly I don't support. So right now, that's what we've been focusing for what you're doing at Americans for Fair Treatment. So let's kind of walk through some of the action items that you as an organization can help with these public sector employees right now who are looking for an outlet. What's the value add, if you will, that the Americans for Fair Treatment represent?
Yeah, well, when public sector unions control your dues payments, control the windows in which you can resign from the union, speak directly to your employer, any public employee that wants to declare union independence is going to run into some issues. What Americans for Treatment has done is crack the code. We know how public employees can assert union independence, and when they're ready to do it, when they want to do it, we can lead them down the path. They don't have to start from scratch. One of my friends describes some of what we do as, if you're looking to buy a house, it's a complicated process. Not insurmountable, but it's complicated. A whole industry has arisen around buying a house. You've got people who inspect homes for a living. You've got realtors who make the deal happen. You've got lawyers who draft up the documents. We do all that when it comes to asserting one's union independence. So letters, we've got letters on our website that you can use to resign from your union. We've got forms that people can use to file with their labor relations board when they feel like they've been wronged or they want to start their own union. And we've got plenty of resources. All you have to do is call us, and we can walk you through and help you find some of those things. Nice thing is we do it all for free.
Ooh, free. People like free, David. So when we're talking about these specific resources, particularly, I guess, like specifics, what kind of resources are you referring to?
Yeah, so I mentioned a letter.
Yeah. Dig into that a little bit.
Yeah. Many people have gone through the resignation process using the letters that we provide on our website. It's not terribly complicated, but if you had to sit down and start from scratch, you wouldn't know how to do it. Moreover, there are complicated rules that unions make you follow in order to get out of your union.
Yeah, you spoke of that last time, that they would, and even like in the renewals, they would throw in like, if you don't get the letter in a certain like time frame between like when the first meeting was to the last meeting, and then you're like, oh wait, what? And then like, oh, too late. Sorry, you're renewed already.
Yeah, look, if
crazy.
If you've ever tried to resign from your gym or end your Verizon plan, you'll experience just a piece of what public sector employees experience when they try to leave their union. But again, the public sector unions are far more savvy and less interested in customer service because they have a monopoly over these people in their workplace.
Right.
So some of the forms that public sector unions are making people sign in order to become members are highly restrictive. They're signed in circumstances that that prevent a public sector employee from reading or understanding them. And then when they go to resign, what they realize is the unions made them sign an agreement that, for instance, this is a hot one right now, that they agree to pay union dues regardless of their membership status. Make any sense to you?
How is that legal?
This would be like if you had you're trying to get out of your gym membership, and they said, yeah, you can quit your gym membership, but you still have to pay all the dues that you would have had to pay. There are times where you might have to pay a month or two. We're talking about for a year, and you don't get to use the gym while you're paying those dues. I mean, that's the worst part of this. The union will kick you out, but make you pay dues regardless of your membership status.
Wow.
So just one example among many of some of the difficulty that people run into when they're getting out of unions. We are hip to all these tricks. In fact, we put something on the website just recently detailing 3 of the different ways that government unions will use to try to keep people in. That's one of them. Restrictive terms that you don't understand until you actually go to resign.
So, David, what other things are there as red flags that people should be looking out for? Because, I mean, I'm sure your average employee who's hearing this are like, oh, what? Like, that's a thing? So I'm sure you come across us all day long. Like my day job, we're in greater telecom and cybersecurity. So when I'm talking to an IT director and they start talking about like a phishing attack, I'm like, I get you and I speak your language. But if I were to go ahead and start talking to Susie down in accounting, she might not know exactly what the phishing campaign is. Like, we're going to go phishing as a team. Like, what is this? So I think there is a lot of people who maybe they don't understand just because they don't speak legalese. They don't know what to look for. So maybe you can dig a little bit more of that.
Well, you don't have to understand legalese to see the biggest problem about public sector unions. So right now in New York, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Illinois, among others, there are progressive politicians and public sector employees who are working together to raise taxes and grow government. In Pennsylvania, for example, the governor's calling for a $4 billion billion with a B tax increase. More than half of those who are supporting that budget increase are public sector union officials who've been supporting Governor Wolf, the most liberal governor in America. During the 2020 election, public sector unions across the country spent about $250 million on politics, and 90% or so went to Democrats. Unfortunately, that means that the public sector unions that are looking to go government end up having enormous influence over the Democrats that they've campaigned for.
It's a slush fund. That's all it is.
And you know what do public sector unions? What do public sector unions get out of that? Well, big government means more public employees, more members, more union dues. In other words, the pathway to growing public sector unions is to grow government itself. And that what I'm describing is really a vicious cycle.
Yeah, that's a super vicious cycle, to say the least. It's going to be, it's like an avalanche. It's just going to keep getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it implodes on itself. That's just like the inevitable outcome. Right.
And we run into public employees all the time who are actually funding that vicious cycle, didn't really realize what was going on. But, I mentioned that 90% or so of that $250 million across the country were going to Democrats. That does not reflect membership. Many members believed that the union would be a protection for them when an employer comes after them unjustly. Sometimes the union does that, But the primary purpose of public sector union officials right now is to grow their power and influence. And they've done that largely by co-opting and living off of the Democratic Party. I don't know that it had to be the Democratic Party. It certainly could have looked some other way, but this is how it has evolved in this country. And public sector union employees, the folks that unions are supposed to represent, when they find that out, a lot of them want to take a step to declare union independence. This is not something I want to be a part of.
Yeah, you mentioned assert their union independence. I like that line. And you mentioned that a lot of folks, they don't realize that the union isn't there to help them, because it goes to, again, this like kind of perpetual cycle. You have the public schooling system and public schooling employees who are represented by their unions. So, I mean, if kids are taught that the union is there to help protect you, and it's being taught by teachers who have an incentive via the unions to maintain that union that happens to be a public sector union, I mean, I think your average bear can figure out that just something doesn't seem to really maybe add up. And if this was any other circumstance where it wasn't being forced by government and people just are, you know, frogging the boiling pot of water, so used to it at this point that they're just numb, that if this was happening at your company or your other place of business that wasn't, you know, this wasn't forced, you'd be like, hold up, something doesn't add up.
Yeah. Well, people are standing up. I mean, public sector workers across the country right now are filing lawsuits against their union to end their forced funding of the union's politics. That's good news.
So we have good news. I like good news. And as we kind of turn towards where we're ending the show, I like to paint a better future, a better picture. That's what we like to do in sales, right? Paint that new reality. So, David, what's the new reality? What can folks who maybe have found that the public sector unions, the public sector career path, it's just now they're realizing it for what it is. It's inefficient. Now they're finding their money is just being ripped away from their paychecks without their consent. What can those folks do? Where is that positive image for the future for them?
It doesn't have to be that way. I think union independence looks like it's a place where individuals can freely talk about their union, about their political beliefs outside of work without reprisal of the union at work. I think people should be listened to by their unions. They should have the choice not to fund a union. They should have a choice to leave a union at any time. And ultimately, I think they should have the choice to work directly with their employer to affect changes in their own terms and conditions of employment, should they desire, and to do that without a union. Right now, that last bit is something that public employees really don't have a choice about. Right now, you could assert your independence from the union to a point. You could stop paying dues. If you could stop supporting the union, you could stop being afraid of the union. You could sue your union when it fails to properly represent you, or takes actions that are inconsistent with your employment goals. But the reality is, in most places in America, the union still has the ability to forcibly represent you. It's something they call exclusive representation. And you know, the U.S. Supreme Court has for a long time saw that there is a First Amendment problem with the idea of being exclusively represented, forcibly represented by an organization that does not speak for you. It's like putting words into your mouth. And that's a big problem that many are urging the Supreme Court to address now. It's also a problem that many state legislatures are looking at. But one thing that public sector employees can do, even though that is not an option right now in many places, is to stand up and show political support for their ability to speak directly with their employer, to kick out their union when it's no longer doing its job.
Well, that's a heck of a call to action if I ever heard one, David Osborne. And as folks who are watching the video version of the program, yes, folks, we do a video version now of the program. For the longtime listeners, are like 3 years, and now we have video. Well, now you're telling us? Well, it's new, folks. So at the bottom, we have the ticker here, www.americansforfairtreatment.org. David, is there social media we can go ahead and make sure we link for folks as well?
There is, yeah. I'd encourage you to visit our website. It's afft.org. Or we have a Twitter feed. We have Facebook. All the mediums you could possibly imagine. You can connect with us there.
Fantastic.
Give us a phone call. Either one.
Yeah, and what we'll do, because folks, this is important, right? This is honestly the conversations that we need to be having with folks who they don't know. And part of the way we can get things better is candidly going out of our way to help. And what the goal of the show is, over my shoulder, educate, enlighten, and inform. And that's what we're trying to do here at the Brian Nichols Show. So David Osborne, as always, thank you for all the work you're doing. The Americans for Fair Treatment. The links are in the show notes. David Osborne, thanks for joining the Brian Nichols Show.
Thanks, Brian.
Alrighty, folks, that's going to wrap up my conversation with David Osborne from the Americans for Fair Treatment. Thank you, David, for joining the program, and thank you, folks, for joining us here on today's amazing episode. If you enjoyed the episode, well, do me a favor. Make sure you go ahead and hit that share button, and you can share it on Twitter, Facebook, Minds.com, Parler.com, and make sure you go ahead and tag me at B Nichols Liberty. Also, if you enjoyed the video of the version of the show, well, please give it a thumbs up and make sure you hit that subscribe button so you're not missing a single episode. Also, on your favorite podcaster, make sure you hit that subscribe button as well. Now, I did tease, and for those of you here in the video version, this awesome "Don't Hurt People and Don't Take People's Stuff" bumper sticker. How can you get one of these awesome new bumper stickers? Well, you can head over to the Patreon and become a supporting listener of the Brian Nichols Show. Yes, all entry-level executives here in the Brian Nichols Show at the Patreon level will be getting a brand new bumper sticker at the $5 level. So if you want to go ahead and help supporting the program while also getting some awesome new swag to definitely pique some interest, head over to our Patreon link in the show notes. Support the program. Again, $5 a month. Come on, that's less than a cup of coffee from Starbucks. And you get an awesome bumper sticker in return, and you get to support the show. Why not? Folks, thank you for joining us on today's episode. What's coming up here on Friday? Well, we are going to have a conversation about how free markets destroy. That's right. Chris Gargill from Free Markets Destroy joins the Brian Nichols Show, discussing all things of how the free markets destroy what? Climate change, poverty, hunger, and more. So make sure you hit subscribe so you're not missing a single episode. With that being said, though, folks, it's Brian Nichols signing off here on the Brian Nichols Show for David Osborne. We'll see you Friday.
Thanks for listening to The Brian Nichols Show. Find more episodes at briannicholsshow.com.